Hey everyone, welcome to ReBloom, the podcast where we explore the power of change, rediscovery, and living with intention.
That's right. We're your hosts, Lori and Jamie, two friends who really love a good story about transformation.
In each podcast, we're going to chat with inspiring guests who've made bold pivots in their lives or careers. They've let go of what no longer served them to embrace something more authentic, joyful, and true to who they really are.
And the best part, many of them reconnect with passions or dreams they discovered as kids. It's about finding the seeds planted long ago and letting them bloom again.
So if you're ready for real conversations about reinvention, purpose, and following your creative heart, you're in the right place.
Let's dive in and see what it takes to rebloom.
Well, hello, Lori. How are you today?
Hey, Jamie. I'm excited to talk with this guest because I am in love with her work. Oh my gosh, I can't wait to hear her story.
Well, today, everyone, we are welcoming Meg Loeks. She, I think, Lori, combines both of our loves, mine of photography and yours of color.
Absolutely.
And oh my gosh. So first, let's welcome her. Welcome, Meg. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you. I have been fangirling over you for many, many years. If anybody has not seen Meg's work, you must follow her. She has, we will have her links, but she is an incredible photographer. And let me tell you a little bit about her before we hear from her. She is a fine art photographer. She primarily focuses on her social media, showing her beautiful family. She has 5 children, and she shares different scenes, very Americana. They're absolutely gorgeous, beautiful colors. And she is a teacher. She travels. She does online workshops. She also represents Sigma and Profoto and Lightroom. And she is just incredible. And I can't wait to hear more about her story. So welcome, Meg.
Thank you. Thank you. I am excited to share a little bit about my story.
Meg, I'm new to your work through Jamie, and hopefully this is all complimentary. I think it is. It feels like a combination of a little Wes Anderson with a little Dutch Masters, with a little Norman Rockwell, with just a little bit of fairy tale and storytelling all mixed together. They're just incredible images.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a huge compliment because every person that you mentioned has influenced me heavily in some way. I love Wes Anderson. I love his use of color, his use of symmetry, and just incredible compositions. I am deeply, deeply drawn to everything Norman Rockwell. I've been inspired by his work for many, many years. So all the things that you listed are heavy influences for me.
Well, it comes through. So I can't wait to hear your story.
Okay.
So bring us back to the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, most people that we talk to sometimes pick up a paintbrush. Did you pick up a paintbrush or pick up a camera when you were young? And what started you on this journey?
Honestly, it was a little bit of both. I was, I guess, pretty artistic. When I was really little, I was into art of all forms. And then when I was in high school, I was in art class. I was in photography class. I was part of the yearbook staff, and I developed my own prints. We had a dark room at the high school I went to. And that was like my favorite part of the process, was developing my own prints. I really enjoyed that when I was shooting film. But I guess, from a young age, I've always been pretty artistic, and I enjoyed painting and all of that. But I never really felt like I was, gifted with painting and drawing. And maybe part of that has to do with I was more drawn to photography than I was to like painting and drawing in general. Like I had more of, there was more of like a lure for me to photography. So because of that, I just had more passion, to be with a camera. And at that time, when I was in high school, I was mainly photographing macro, flowers, landscapes. I used to live, the house that I grew up in was in between two covered bridges. And so I would photograph those a lot, and just spend a lot of time outside.
Oh, that
Oh,
makes sense. It comes through in your work. So, but you didn't when you pursued photography, but then you took a little side turn and went into marketing. Is that right?
Close. So I went to college, changed my major several times. And originally, I was going for just general business and failing miserably. Is not my cup of tea. No matter how hard I worked, I just couldn't get it. I couldn't grasp it. I was taking like I had to take finance twice. I had to take statistics twice. I had a tutor, so it wasn't like I wasn't trying, but I just didn't get it. And I'll never forget when I met with my counselor. She sat me down and she said to me, "I think it's time that you consider a different major." And I was like, oh, so like I'm already a couple years in. What do I do now? And so I, started looking through different majors and I was like, what is the most creative business major that I could have, basically? And I fell on advertising, actually. So advertising and PR. And I went to a school. It was a liberal arts school, and advertising and PR were actually in the School of Communications. Marketing was in the School of Business, so they were like a separate thing.
mhm.
So I went to School of Communications, and I got my advertising and PR degree with an emphasis on advertising, which was, definitely more creative. And I excelled. I did really well. Got straight A's basically, and really enjoyed it. So I ended up graduating with an advertising degree.
That's so funny. It's, Meg, I feel like we just had a guest and Lori felt like their paths were similar. I feel like our paths were similar. I was a photographer in high school, got to school. I couldn't understand the accounting. I'm like, okay, why is debit left and credit right? And my brain was not functioning and I hated accounting. And I became a communication major too. And again, I think it's because many of us are visual learners and we love the creative side of it. And so how wonderful of your advisor to guide you in that direction and find your passion and joy creatively in college. That's amazing.
So my question is, what made you decide to go the business route initially? Was that
Yeah, that's a
something
good
that you
question.
thought, was that a should kind of thing? Something you thought you should do, but not that you wanted to?
Parents.
Yes.
My parents are super supportive and amazing, but there was a little bit of a push to go the practical route.
Mhm.
Um, go for a general business major, take Spanish, even though I wanted to take French. And I didn't really excel in Spanish either. I do have a minor in it, but I don't practice it. So I couldn't, speak in Spanish, very fluently. So it was one of those things where it was just, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I kept kind of changing. I originally was going to go for social work. And then that shifted to, I'm like, I don't think I can do this. And then my parents were like, why don't you go for general business, major?
Yeah.
And so they're like, it's really, versatile, like flexible. I'm like, okay, so that's what I did. And then I struggled. So
Yeah.
that's really what it came down to.
But
Yeah.
it's smart to pivot. And I have been a university instructor for the past 18 years, and I teach communication. And I love that, as I said, that you had an advisor and even parents who are encouraging. It's taking the things that you can succeed in, and how wonderful that, I mean, you were in it, but yes, it was a good pivot even while you were there. And so great to find that. And there are good jobs, everyone, in communication. So that's
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
yeah.
So you
Yeah.
got the degree in communications and or marketing and PR, is
Marketing
that
and PR.
correct? And did
Yes.
you work for a PR firm then or a marketing firm?
So what I ended up doing is I graduated and um, basically, if you wanted to work for like an advertising firm, you had to go somewhere like Chicago, which it wasn't that far, but locally in the city that I was, living at, where my college was at, there really aren't advertising firms. So basically, what is typical is to just get hired by a company that has like a marketing department.
Mhm.
And so that's what I did. I worked various jobs. Right out of college. So when I graduated college, that's when the market had crashed. So it was a really hard time, to be looking for a job. And I was super fortunate that I found a job right away.
Super.
And so I was like thankful for that, but I didn't love it. And I was doing like their marketing, their email blasts, stuff like that. But not as much as I wanted to. So I ended up finding a job at a health IT company, and it was a startup, which was amazing. They were so fun and creative, and really small company, obviously being a startup. And so I did a lot of stuff there in marketing, again, advertising, email blasts, stuff like that. But I also like worked on the apps that we had and like design and stuff like that. It was a really great job, and I did that for a few years.
Nice. So while you were doing that, were you still continuing your love of photography and
Yeah,
taking
so
images and
that's a great question. So what happened is actually when I went to college, I stopped. Like I
Mm.
didn't really pick up my camera anymore at that point. And so all through college, I was not doing any sort of photography really. And I had a photography scholarship that was given to
Oh,
me,
wow.
but I didn't pursue it because at that time, I thought like the only job for me as a photographer was a wedding photographer. And I was like, I don't want to work on the weekends.
Yeah.
I was young and stuff. So that was my like skewed view of it, like that there are other things. So it wasn't until I started having children that I picked my camera, back up again. I think that's kind of a natural thing, right? To be wanting to like photograph your children. So I started getting into it again a little bit more, and I switched to digital at that point. So
Yeah.
because previously it was film, and so I was doing that, and I wanted to take better pictures of my kids. So I was working at this health IT company, but also taking classes on the side, like online classes on the side, to just get better at my photography and photographing my children.
oh,
When
I
you
love
were taking the classes, which I think is so important, was there, because, most people when they're taking pictures of their babies or their kids, they're just, like, oh, and, they're down there just taking a normal shot with their iPhone or a camera. What was the switch for you that was lit up in those classes that made you think I can be really creative with my children's photography? Or was that just something that was in your heart?
I, at that time, really, my photography was just different in general. So for me at that time, it was more so like following my kids around with a camera. And
Okay.
I was much more of like a documentary photographer than I
Mm.
am today. So at that time, I was doing that. But also, there was some fine art in there too, because if we were within the house and I was photographing them, documentary. But if we went outside, it was more of like a fine art kind of thing. And we would get outside like every morning for a walk, and I would photograph them. We live in the country, still do, and so that was like really good for all of us just to get outside. And I used to just love, doing that, following them around with my camera. So it was just kind of different then at that time. I also realized while I was photographing them that I could, that I might want to make this a business. And so I started a business on the side where I was photographing clients, mainly families, children, all of that.
Mhm.
And then the company that I worked for, the health IT company that I worked for, was bought out. And so I, at that time, was very pregnant. I was like 7 months pregnant or something like that. They were being bought out. I didn't want to have to interview for a new job. At that point, I was like, you know what? I'm going to stay home more with my kids and I'm going to start a photography business. And so that's what I did. Basically, it kind of just worked out, I think, beautifully, losing my job, but at the same time, doing something that I really enjoy doing on the side.
Interesting. Sometimes the universe does that.
Mm-hmm.
They point you in the right direction and they make changes for you that force you towards something you should be doing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what did your first photography business look like?
It was mainly children, families, newborn, some maternity. And they mainly came to my house. We had a big meadow and stuff, and I would photograph them there, or we go to a park or whatever. But I also had a studio in my house, and I actually at that time specialized in like posed newborn, which is so different from what I do now. But I took classes on like how to safely pose newborns, wrapping them, doing the different poses, all of that. It's really hard work. Like that's the only thing I didn't love about it is a lot of the time you had a baby who wasn't tired or whatever. So it's really hard to do those poses when they're not tired. So eventually, I did that for a while, but then I realized, I really love in-home sessions, like going to the client's house and photographing them there, like more lifestyle. I also like the outdoor shoots, but I really love the in-home sessions. So I started trying to kind of transition my business a little bit, not doing as much of like the post newborn, but going to the client's house, photographing their family there. And I think a lot of the time the families loved it too because they didn't have to go anywhere. They were comfortable at home. I came in, brought everything in. So it was really nice, and I really enjoyed that part of my client business.
Well, and how long did you do that?
I did that, gosh, several years. I stopped in 2016. I closed my client business in 2016.
Okay. And why did you choose to close that in 2016?
So I closed my client business in 2016 because everything was going pretty good, but I also was not very good with like some of the business aspects. Surprise, surprise, right? And so I was overbooking myself. Like I was getting exhausted, right?
Yeah.
I wasn't charging enough because everybody was my friend too. So I was overbooking. I wasn't charging enough at all. And I was spending so much time editing these client images and giving them so many images. I was making like no money.
And you also have, at this point, 4 children at home too? 26, three children at home. So, I mean, that, and I think that's a classic thing that we do is that we think, oh, we're going to give it away or we're going to, it's just a friend. But people also don't seem to understand how difficult, how much work it is as a photographer. I mean, it's a ton of work. And I think they think, oh, it's just easy. Come bring your camera. No, it's not only the session, but to your point, the editing and everything. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work.
It is. Yeah. And so with all that said, I was doing that. And then I was offered a teaching job to teach photography online. So I was teaching, which I loved. And I was doing my client business, which it was okay. And then my oldest son started having some symptoms. He was like limping. on and off,
Mm.
just getting kind of nauseous at times, random fevers, bloody noses, stuff like that. And it happened on and off for like a few months. And so we were like, okay, maybe we should get him into the doctor. Maybe it's like growing pains or something. But it was only in one leg that he was having pain, not both, which is actually a symptom of leukemia, specifically ALL, which is what he has. And so we had brought him in, and then he ended up getting diagnosed with leukemia at that time. So I was like, I can't do all of this stuff. Like I can't maintain my client business, which I'm not making as much money off of that, right? And it's taking up more of my time. I'm making way more money teaching. I enjoy teaching. I'm utilizing my time better. Like just, I'm like, I let go of the client business. It just made the most sense because it was honestly like working two jobs. And that was obviously not something I could do, especially after he was diagnosed and everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. How is he doing now?
He's doing really good. So now we had a 3-year treatment, and then he became cancer free. And then a few years later, I think it's like a few years later, he was diagnosed again. So he has leukemia again. And we're about a year and a half into this treatment. So we've got about a year and a half left. But he's doing good. He's in an easier part of the treatment now. The first year is the hardest. And so this one especially was harder than the first one because even though it wasn't a relapse, they treated it as a relapse, which means that the treatment in general, the drugs, everything are much more intense. It's like, and he was in the hospital for longer, all of that stuff. So everything was just more intense this time around. But he's doing really good right now.
Well, that's wonderful. So with all of that, because that's a lot, mm-hmm. Were you also at that time transitioning, or at what point were you transitioning from more documentary style photography to more of the style that you're doing now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it really, for me, was while I was taking classes online. So I was teaching, but I was also taking classes myself. And so I just learned a lot about myself. So those early years, I was doing some documentary, but it wasn't really that long before I started like just getting more into portraiture and fine art. I also did a lot of still life. At that time, I don't as much anymore. I go through phases of different,
we all do.
And genres.
We all do. I know. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I was doing all of that stuff, and I just realized that I really enjoy this. I really love this part of photography, the fine art part, the portraiture. I felt like it filled like a creative void for me, and so it is something that I like really needed. And so it was really almost kind of therapeutic, being able to style and come up with like a cohesive like color palette, a harmonious color palette. That's the kind of stuff that I really enjoy. So I that's really, honestly, it was probably around just before my son got diagnosed. So 2015, 2016 that I found my voice.
Well, I think, and thank you for sharing, bravely sharing your son's journey, because I do think that, having that creativity in our life when we have stress in our life. I know I found my creative voice with florals. Mm-hmm. And styling because it was an escape. And I think in order for us to be strong mamas or strong individuals, sometimes we do need to gift ourselves that creative space. And Lori and I have talked about that. She has creativity in her life every day, but it's important to find it, whether it be in drawing or painting or styling or photography or nature, that we find that, because that, I don't know, for me, Meg, when my kids were teenagers, it was really challenging, and I needed that. I needed it. And I'm sure you needed it too when when your son was really ill, and
Mhm.
you need that, you need, you need to find the strength, and so
Right.
creativity helps me to find it. Did it help you as well?
Yeah, I think what I always like to tell people is like, for me, it's self care. And I think for a lot of people, it is.
Mm,
Self care can be so many things. I think sometimes people get, hung up on, well, self care is like getting your hair done or getting a massage or whatever. And those things are great. I definitely think those are self care things. But self care comes in many forms. And sometimes it's like going out for a walk. It's
yeah.
spending time with my camera. It's spending time in my garden, pulling weeds. I enjoy
Yeah.
I enjoy weeding my garden, my vegetable garden. I enjoy cleaning my chicken coop, which is such a dirty job. But it helps clear my head and keep me grounded when I'm out
Yeah.
there doing like hard labor sometimes. So I don't know. I think self-care comes in many forms. So for me, that it was like an outlet to like give myself a little bit of time to, like, this is my time. This is Meg's
Yeah.
time, to spend time on the camera and be creative.
And you're not being selfish. Me time is good time. Me time is strength time. And I think sometimes people confuse that. They think that me time is selfish time. No, sometimes me time is just the air that you need to breathe and the strength that you need to give to yourself so you can be stronger for everyone else. And yeah, Lori wanted to say
So,
something.
so you've found your voice, and it's a beautiful voice.
Yes.
So I don't know a lot about fine art photography and all the avenues. Like, what does your business look like now? I believe you're still teaching.
Yeah.
Do you have any plans to do a book? Which I think a book would be beautiful. Just kind of lay out what you're doing now.
Yeah. The past, I would say, couple years, it's sort of felt like maybe survival mode. Like I have all these hopes and dreams that I definitely try to manifest, but like at the same time, like my husband was deployed and for a while, and so I knew basically it was like I was just staying afloat, with him being gone and 5 kids and trying to run a business. And then he came home because my son got diagnosed while he was away. And so then there was all of that. And so this year's felt really good. Like we still have challenges, of course, is with his health and everything else, but there's been more time for just so many things, from family vacations to just like normalcy, like being able to be home more. And then also for me, business wise, being able to accomplish some things that I've been wanting to like accomplish. And so, yeah, I hope to come out with a new class next year. I really enjoy doing in-person workshops. And so I plan to continue doing that and traveling to those. And I do love the idea of a book. I don't know about now, but I feel like that's a great long-term goal. It's honestly been something that's been on my radar for many years. For now, it's more so like my new class. It's also, I'm building a studio. So I'm trying to get that done. And I also might be picking up client work again. So
How about that?
I know. So that's huge because it's been 10 years. It's been a long
time. Now you'll charge more. Now you're going to charge more. The business girl has learned.
Yes. And I'm going to heavily limit the amount of client sessions I plan to do. I already have one booked for next year in July. Ideally, though, my dream client session is, and I'm just going to only be advertising for it, is in-home sessions.
Yeah.
Not as much like outdoor in a beautiful field or whatever. I want to do in-home, and I only think I'm going to book about 5 next year. So very limited. But I want to get back into it slowly. So
slowly.
Will you bring the voice that you've honed into your new client work?
I think so. In some ways, I will not be doing like. So some of the work I do is heavily styled. Like it takes hours to style, plan, whatever. And so I don't plan to do that sort of thing. At least I don't think so, unless a client really wants that. More so for me, it's going to be like lifestyle sessions, which is some of what I do with my own family here and there, especially like just out and about around our house, like photographing my kids, feeding the chickens and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff that I also really enjoy. So I do plan and hope to do, those types of like photos with the family. So not so much heavily styled, more so lifestyle.
Let's take a quick minute and thank our amazing sponsors. Our podcast is proudly brought to you today by Jet Creative and Urban Stems. Jet Creative is a women-owned marketing firm committed to community and empowerment since 2013. Are you ready to rebloom and build a website or start a podcast? Visit jetcreative.com/podcast to kickstart your journey. They will help you bloom in ways you never imagined. And bonus, our listeners get an exclusive discount when you mention ReBloom. And a huge thanks to Urban Stems, your go-to and our go-to source for fresh, gorgeous bouquets and gifts delivered coast to coast. Use Bloom Big 20 and save 20% on your next order. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at ReBloom Podcast. Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to you for joining us today. So for our listeners, when they look at Meg's beautiful work, Meg, on average, when you're looking at one of your fine art photographs that you've done with your kids, how much time on average goes into one of them between setting it up and styling and editing? I mean, it's not just a snap and go. There's a lot that goes into it.
So I would say a quick setup for me would be about an hour.
Mm-hmm.
I would say on average, 2 hours is typical just to style. So that's setting up my lighting and styling.
Yeah.
The shooting process takes like 10 minutes. It's super short.
Yeah.
It depends on if I'm doing composite work and all that kind of stuff. So it's a very quick process, the shooting process, and it needs to be if my kids are involved because attention spans and all of that want to make it really quick. And then after that, God love my husband. He takes down everything for me. So I don't have to do any of that. If he's around, he will take care of all my lighting, the whole setup, everything. Because I usually have to go lay down after I'm done with a photo shoot. And then editing, it does depend, but I would say like on average, an hour and a half to cull and edit, So, but if I'm doing several composites, then it might be more like 2.5 hours of editing.
Wow. It's a lot. And I was fortunate. I just took one of Meg's classes online. And for anyone listening, if you're interested in photography and storytelling, it's a brilliant class. It's really great. And I know she's teaching it again in the future. But she really talks a lot about color and styling. And she got me thinking about it in such a different way. And I'm sure too, Meg, do the ideas come to you and then you just like try to see if you can make it happen? I mean, is it a little trial and error? Is it, just what tends to inspire you to make the stories or do the stories that you do?
So I will say, I feel like majority of everything that I do is inspired by like a real life moment, something that happened with my family. It's usually the case. Sometimes it is something that I saw, like a Norman Rockwell painting or whatever. I'm like, oh, I love that. But then typically what I do is I'll take that inspiration and then alter it in a way that fits my narrative and fits, my family lifestyle a little more. So I change things up in that regard just to make it more me. And so the inspiration is honestly deeply rooted in my family and my children and just the phase of life, especially that I'm in, which I find, kind of comical because parenting can be really comical at times. And we've got, my oldest is 13 and my youngest is 2.5, and it's kind of chaotic. And I don't know, there's a lot of funny moments that happen every day. So I get inspired by that.
I love
Are
it.
your children creative?
Some are, yes, and some are not. I shouldn't say. So I feel like they're all creative in their own way. Like my oldest son, he loves science. He's so into science and Legos, and he can build these like amazing things with Legos. My second son, Woody, he is the creative, artistic one. Like he's a really good singer, artist. He likes to write. My third son, he's really good. He likes basketball and just sports in general. He's just really athletic. So they're all kind of like different in what they're good at. But I would say the most artistic would be my second son. But he hasn't really expressed any interest in photography. But he enjoys watching me edit. So I don't know where that will go. He always asks me questions like, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he likes that sort of thing. So I don't know. Maybe he'll be a digital artist someday.
Do you get eye rolls from them when you say, "Okay, kids, put on the sweaters and the scarves and off we go," or are they willing participants sometimes?
No, not too bad, because I don't really photograph them a lot anymore. So my older boys, I hope like once a month for a photo. So they actually are pretty cool and good with it because it doesn't happen often. My youngest is actually the hardest to photograph. He's just wild. Like he's just wild. He like runs around, doesn't stay put. He's a bit of a bulldozer. So I like
he's the youngest of 5. God bless.
He is. Yep. So I like to do video with him. Like just I find that easier with him, and it's a way for me to like document him without it being stressful and like having a lot of weight on my shoulders. In regards to getting him in front of the camera. So I like to do videos of him, like feeding the chickens and stuff. He likes to do that.
I love it. Well, and people ask me this about my social media, my Instagram, because I take florals and you take photos of your family. I do it purely for my joy. I'm not doing it for anyone else. And as we've already said, it's my creative outlet. You're doing that as well. The documentation or the portraiture that you're doing of your family is purely for you, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, if we took away like my teaching and all of that stuff, my in-person workshops and stuff, I would still be doing it. So that's I know that to be true. So that wouldn't change at all. And part of me, as my kids get older, has started to shift and realizing too, like that I'm going to need to shift what I'm documenting. And so I have been doing more self-portraits than I used to, which I really enjoy.
That's interesting.
And so I have always done them, but I feel like I've really, the past couple years, pushed to do them like heavily, like more than I normally do. And it's been very therapeutic.
Well, and they're beautiful. And, it's interesting. I love how you say that if you were to take it all away, because I will always say my Instagram is my portfolio. And I teach, I do other things, but that's my portfolio that hopefully leads people to know what my joy is. And if they want to see other things that I can do, I'm happy to show them. But I don't think I could ever give that up. I mean, and that to your point, I mean, just the ability to create the way you want to create it with no boundaries. No one's telling you what to do. You get to decide what it is, tell the story, create it, have fun with it, and then also capture your beautiful kids. So it's a win-win all the way around.
And your chickens. I love
and your chickens.
I love
Are they
how
that
the chickens
behaved?
are part of the scenes a lot. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are. Well, and yes, some of them are well behaved, and some of them are like a little bit more standoffish. It just depends on the chicken and the breed, but like in general, I do really adore them and our ducks. And I just the other day, I actually just had a photo shoot with just my chickens. Like I just had 3 of my chickens like in front of a backdrop and photograph them. I just
Well,
really
that's
enjoyed
what
it.
I was thinking when you said your kids are growing up and
Mhm.
what's the next. I'm like, chickens. You still have the
Chickens.
chickens.
Oh yeah, yeah, I do love them, and I think they're just so quirky and funny, and enjoyed like having them in our portraits too, and like having things be a little bit silly, I guess, um, when our chickens are especially involved and our ducks. But I'm enjoying like dabbling in different things the past couple of years, especially.
Well, I love your quirky portraits on your website, the one where she's holding the chicken.
Mm-hmm.
Like I guess in my head, I went to seeing some of your client work
Mm-hmm.
where they're portraits, but maybe they're holding things that are from their homes or,
Mm-hmm.
the way that you do that make them so unique, almost like kind of those weird Renaissance paintings where people would hold things that were
Mm-hmm.
odd. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a bit like surreal. I think there's a little bit of
Yeah.
surrealness mixed into it,
Yeah,
uh,
exactly.
Yeah.
which I love. And nowadays I get the I get the comments of like, "Is this AI?" And I'm like, "Oh, no, never."
Yeah.
I don't use AI, but it. But at the same time, I don't want to say I view it as a compliment, but I love that people can see that surrealness. They're like,
Yeah.
it's
It's
almost like,
it's otherworldly and
yeah. So
Yeah.
that, yeah.
fantasy. Yeah.
Yep. So I try to take it as a compliment of like, they're just seeing that.
You
Uh,
just do it the right way. You're yeah. Not
well,
no.
there's
I
just
don't want to bash AI. There's good things about AI.
Yeah.
there are, but it's beautiful, the thought and the story. I think what's really magical about when you look at one of your portraits is that you feel yourself immersed in a scene or a story, and you can feel it. You feel the powder or the if you're making a cake, you can feel.
Right.
I mean, you just feel like you're part of that emotion that's happening at that time. You not only capture the imagery, but you capture the emotion. And that's hard to do, capturing
Yeah.
emotion
Well,
as
and I
well.
think I think the key to that is authenticity, and
Yes.
when you're photographing something, um, you know, either tying it back to your life in some way, having it relate to your life in some way, or your subject's life in some way. And when you do that, when you photograph things that, are personal to you or to your subject, they're heartfelt, and you
Yes.
feel that emotion. People aren't, I mean, I it's one of those things, or when we're studying a photograph, people know, they can see when things are forced and when they're not forced.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think it's really important to remember that.
Yeah.
That's actually great advice.
It is great advice. So you've pivoted along the way and you've taken classes. What are you looking towards artistically or professionally for yourself in the future? I know you said you were going to start working with new clients, but what else are you doing personally to grow or pivot?
Yeah, so I would love to take a class of my I have it's been many years actually, so I haven't taken a class in, well, I shouldn't say that. I shouldn't say that. It's been a couple of years, but I did recently take a class on lighting, and
Mm.
to learn more about lighting. And I'd like to continue that. I'd like to continue taking some classes here and there in regards to lighting, but not only that, also Photoshop, just learning more about it, because it's actually the one program where I am self taught, and I know there's a lot more that I can learn in that program. So I'd like to learn more about Photoshop and just color grading too as well, because I love color grading and I know there's also a lot that I don't know. So I'd like to continue down that path and learn some more stuff about, just altering tones and colors. Um, Especially I feel like since my work has gotten more vibrant lately, past couple of years, it keeps getting more vibrant and more colorful every single year. And I'm like, am I like pushing this too far? Am I going like over the top here, but
No, your
not to
color
everybody.
choices, everything. I mean, everything is just so rich and beautiful. And even when you were in your class, you're like, okay, change. I'm like, wow, we're spending a lot on green. Like I have I have a thing about green too, but you're like, okay, take the yellows down. I'm like, brilliant, brilliant. No, you can never have too much color. Color is wonderful.
Well, I
Yeah.
think what you just shared is a really good tip for our listeners is that if you're interested in something, going to find a source to learn more about
Yeah.
it is one really great step. Just dip your toe in, whether it's, a basic class of something you're interested in or anything. Just dive in and just see how it feels. And the more you learn, the more you grow.
Oh yeah, absolutely. You have to put in the work. I like over the years, I've spent so much time, getting up early, staying up late to take classes, but then also just experiment myself. Nothing really came very easy for me. It just wasn't like, oh, I got it, no
Yeah.
problem. It was a process. And some days I would spend all day on my computer playing with the different sliders and seeing what they do. But in that process, I learned so much about the programs by doing that. And so a lot of times people, want you as a teacher, they want you to tell them what to do. But a
Right.
big part of it is really just the need for them to sit down and, of course, take these classes and stuff, but then experiment themselves and um, have play dates and stuff. I do all the time. I have play dates where I set up like a new lighting that I've never tried before, and I make a lot of mistakes. I mess up. I fail all the time, and things don't work out the way I wanted them to. But in that process, I learned so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great advice.
It's okay. It's okay to fail. It is way okay because if you don't try, I mean, you're not going to succeed every time, but you will learn from your failures too. So I love that. I love that piece of advice. Well, speaking of advice, Meg, what small piece of advice do you like to tell your students, or would you like to leave our listeners with today?
I think one of the biggest things for me is that there when it comes to learning anything new or wanting to grow in regards to something, it takes time, and I think we forget that, and we live in a society that glorifies busy and is like now. And really and truly, the process is like an artist. It's like ever evolving. And it takes time. It takes so much time. I put in so many hours. And again, mentioned like the failures, the mistakes, all of that, but nothing was overnight ever. It took
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And my voice 4 years ago as an artist is so different than it is now, and it's going to continue to change. It's just how it is. If it didn't change, I would be concerned. Like I would feel like I plateaued and that I'm not growing as an artist. So I do like to see that change. I'm proud of that change, but I do think it's important to know that things do take time. And I know that sounds maybe cliche, but I think we sometimes forget that.
No, I think that's so true because we're in an instant gratification
We
society.
are.
And
Yeah.
yeah, there were the old masters, like they took years and decades to really hone their skills. It doesn't happen overnight. You're right.
Yeah, and that brings up like another point too of like I create my best work when I take my time.
Yeah.
I create my worst work when I'm rushed. Now, not everybody's that way. I should mention that. Like, I think sometimes people under pressure do really well, and sometimes I do too. But when it comes to like a styled portrait with lots of detail and complicated lighting and everything, I need to have ample time to just set things
Yeah.
up, take test shots, and just take my time, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
And not only take your time to learn, to grow, to enjoy the process of creating, I hope for our listeners too, they will take the time to just sit with one of your beautiful portraits, because there's so much that went into each and every one of them. And they deserve more than just a quick like. They really deserve just take a moment and look at the work that went into it, the color choices, the fun that's happening, the feeling that she's created. Each and every one of them are a little mini masterpiece. They
Yeah.
truly are
Thank you.
beautiful.
It's
And
exquisite work. It
yeah, I
really is.
ditto the book someday. Someday
Yeah.
it will come to you. It will be there.
I'm manifesting that for you
I
because
know.
I picture it like I want it on I want it in my studio. I want it on my coffee table.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely. Meg, you are an absolute delight. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your beautiful creative journey with our listeners. And we hope that everyone feels inspired by you, because we certainly are.
Absolutely. Thank you, Meg.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here, and I really appreciate this time.
Thank you. Lori, my heart is so full just listening to Meg. I have loved following her, and to just have this opportunity to really dive in deep and listen to her process and her journey. It's so inspiring. Everything about it.
Oh, I agree. And I particularly love hearing about how much time the journey in developing and honing your voice and your skill and focusing in your own authenticity and your own story. And she has built such a beautiful career that's focused around her beloved family and the
Yeah.
lifestyle she's living with the chickens in the chicken coop. And there's just so much richness there. And I think that's what makes her work just so beautiful to look at, because every image, that authenticity and that story just comes through.
It does. And our world is rich with layers. And I think Meg shows us all the beautiful layers of life in each and every one of her photos, whether it's humor or depth or even, well, basically truth. She shows us the depth of truth in each and every one of her photos. And it's just, what a joy. Everybody, we will have more of all of Meg's links for you to see her beautiful work and follow along with her on her journey with her family. And we thank you all for joining us today. And until we meet, thank you. And until we meet again, peace, love, and ReBloom. Life is too short not to follow your passions, so go out there and let your heart plant you where you are meant to be and grow your joy.
We will be right here sharing more incredible stories of reinvention with you. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode of ReBloom.
Until next time, I'm Jamie Jameson.
And I'm Lori Siebert.
Peace, love, and ReBloom, dear friends.